So, without further ado, I mean, where do you? I didn't know where to start today. Do you start with Nancy Pelosi and her tone deaf nonsense? Do you start with Amazon being just this symbol of this United States of corporations, United Corporations of America? Oh, by the way, you see my status quo shirt? That could be had. $100 on the GoFundMe get you a status quo shirt. Just keeping it real. $100 get you a status quo shirt or a status quo hat. 127 gets you both. I digress. But we got to start. We got to start with honestly. We got to make sure Nancy Pelosi is an elected speaker for the Democrats. And I know I'll be attacked. I'll be attacked as sexist, but this does not have anything to do with her gender. This morning, there was a big protest outside of Speaker Pelosi, currently Minority Leader Pelosi's office. And that protest was 100 activists. I think the Justice Democrats and another group set it up. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez came down to the office. I think she was like standing up with the activists to basically say to Nancy Pelosi, we need urgent action on climate change. We need urgent action on climate change. Not this what Pelosi has said. We're going to create a select committee on climate change. The planet is burning, and Nancy Pelosi wants to create a select committee on climate change. So let me read to you a little bit more about the protest this morning, which was right outside Pelosi's office. I love that Ocasio-Cortez showed up. I hope she sticks with this because there's no reason, as a congresswoman, she should be stopping her activism. She was elected because of her organizing and activism in addition to her policies. So she needs to stick with activists and organizing. So good sign so far for Ocasio-Cortez. Protesters joined by Representative-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez took over Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi's office Tuesday and staged a sit-in, calling for her to commit to urgent action on climate change. The group of more than 100 people was organized by the environmental group Sunrise and the Justice Democrats. The protesters, including Ocasio-Cortez, are calling on Pelosi to create and give real power to a new select committee on climate change. The proposed committee, called the Select Committee for a Green New Deal, would be similar to one Pelosi established as House Speaker in 2007, but with more authority. Between March 2007 and December 2010, the Select Committee on Energy Independence and Global Warming held 80 hearings and briefings exploring American energy resources, clean technologies, climate change, and the risks associated with it. Then, Representative Ed Markey of Massachusetts led the panel, which didn't have the power to write legislation. Pelosi pushed a climate agenda during her time as House Speaker, including a cap-and-trade bill in 2009 aimed at reducing emissions. Ocasio-Cortez is among incoming Democratic members who have not stated a position on whether they will support Pelosi as Speaker in Congress. Pelosi responded to the protests with a statement in support of the activists and said their energy is, quote, leading the way on the climate crisis. Quote, I have recommended to my House Democratic colleagues that we reinstate the Select Committee to address the climate crisis. All right, well, I'm always going to keep it real. Big fan of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Big fan. But not a big fan of calling for a committee. It sounds nice. It sounds nice. A Green Deal, a Green New Deal committee. That sounds wonderful. But we don't need a committee. We don't need to study climate change. We don't need to, sit here and bring in academics and experts. No. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the protesters and the organizers with her, the other progressives in the House, they need to call for an immediate ban on fracking in the United States of America. They need to call for an immediate hundreds of billions you're going to need to go to every single landmine, landfill, and nuclear waste site and remove toxic nuclear waste that has not been properly sealed, which is a big cause of climate change. They need to call for an immediate immediate hundreds of billions of dollars from the government to invest in renewable energy, wind, solar, and other innovative technologies. And those job programs can be invested from the government. Jill Stein talked about this, meaning 100% shift to renewable energy now, not tomorrow. Fracking ban comes first, followed by that. We also need to tackle big agriculture, big agro business, and the animal industry, which I haven't covered much, but meat and the way these animal farms are contributing to climate change significantly. We don't need a committee. Sorry. I love the protesters out there. I'm a big fan of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but the jury's out. There's enough science out there. Just look around. Look at the storms. Look at the wildfires. Look at the drought. Look at the famine. You don't need a committee. This is theatrics, a committee. And, Nancy Pelosi, if you look at her donor sheet, she's taking a hell of a lot of money from big oil. And by the way, this isn't covered. This isn't covered quite a bit. Boufray, AOC, she wants to build on an existing committee. The committee will draft legislation to combat climate change. That's fine. I'm not saying we can't have a committee. My point is, the things that a committee would tell you, we already know. Ocasio-Cortez and other progressives need to immediately call for a nationwide ban on fracking and new natural gas pipelines. You might say, well, that's not realistic, Jordan, and blah, 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 blah. No. We are electing people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We are electing capital P progressives to make what they say, what the establishment says is radical and not realistic, mainstream. So it isn't radical. You don't get change until you force it and you sway public opinion and you apply pressure on the Paul Ryans and the Mitch McConnells and the Nancy Pelosi's. So you could have a committee, that's fine. But we need specific demands. And it starts with fracking. It starts with these nuclear waste sites and landmine and landfills that are, there is toxic uranium, there is toxic black coal, there is toxic things from the Manhattan Project days all over this country, and nobody even knows about it. And there's another element here. It's not just, so you might look at Nancy Pelosi's donor sheet. OpenSecrets.com, by the way, is it .com or .org? Open Secrets is a great blog. And press the share button. Let's get this out to as many people as possible. You might look at it and say, oh, well, I don't see specifically ExxonMobil. I don't see specifically Energy Transfer Partners. I don't see specifically Phillips 66. I don't see specifically big donations from the oil industry. She has. The banks. A lot of these Democrats don't go after the oil companies because the banks and the Wall Street investors that the Democratic Party sucks on their teat for support, they're heavily invested in these oil companies. They're very heavily invested in these pipelines. They're heavily invested in fracking. So it's not always direct, oh, look, they take a lot of money from big oil. Sometimes they don't take a lot of money from big oil, but they know that their donors at JP Morgan don't want them touching natural gas pipelines and fracking. They know their big donors from Bank of America feel the same way. And fill in the blank, all of these banks. Wells Fargo. But bottom line, the report that recently came out basically said, the United Nations report basically said, you got 12 years before the damage is so bad that it's irreversible. And I think that's being generous because I think a lot of the damage from climate change is already irreversible. I mean, tell me in the live chat where you live and how hot it is over the summer. By the way, it's been hot here during the fall in New York and other places around the country. So you have extreme storms. You have extreme wildfires. You have extreme drought. I mean, we don't need a committee to tell us what we already know. We don't need a committee to tell us what we already know. Todd Hendricks says, I love you on Facebook. Status Quo's Facebook. Thank you, Todd. Frank, If you talk more about rigged elections and especially rigged voting machines, I'd contribute more. What the hell are you talking about, Frank? Did you see my interview with Tim Canova yesterday? What was that? I have covered election fraud quite a bit. Quite a bit. So, saying hi to my Facebook peeps. I got to say, I'm not saying Ocasio-Cortez is wrong and a committee wouldn't work. Sure, you have to legislate and all these things. But a committee is something that takes time. You know, you bring in experts, you do research, yada, yada, yada. We don't have the time for that. There are communities in America that have toxic contaminants going out all over, into the air, into the water. You have new power plants being created all over this country. You have new nuclear plants being created all over this country. Not to mention Trump repealing most of Obama's regulations were a step in the right direction, but not enough, and Trump has repealed them. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't. I think a committee is great. We have three. You need to have 3 or 4 specific demands as the progressives in the House, the progressives in the Senate, and galvanize support. You have the support. The environmental movement is one of the biggest protest movements in the United States of America, if not the biggest. There's a huge cross-section, progressives, centrists, even some Republicans. So, committee? No. And outside of the committee, I want to show you, Nancy Pelosi. Apparently, Nancy Pelosi thinks the Democrats retaking the House is a message that, hey, House Democrats, thank you for saving America. This is the letter that Nancy Pelosi sent to fellow Democrats in the House. Dear Democratic colleague, thank you, House Democrats, for saving America. That's the message I hear from across the country, and I convey that thanks to you. Oh, Jesus. As we travel to Washington for this lame duck period, House Democrats are anything but lame ducks. We are flying high and taking pride in the greatest Democratic victory in the House since 1974. This is because of our excellent candidates, discipline of message, owning the ground, and the amazing leadership of Chairman Ben Ray Lujan. We have great opportunity and therefore great responsibility to get results for the American people. In the next few weeks, we need to be unified, find common ground with Republicans. Oh my God, common ground with extremists, fascists in our legislative engagements, but stand our ground when we must. I want to be clear here. When she says, that's the message I hear from across the country, Nancy Pelosi, in the lead up to the midterm elections, I think did like between 150 and 200 private behind closed doors fundraisers. Is that who she's hearing it from? Big dollar donors? The same big dollar donors who, dare I say, are invested in fracking, are invested in pipeline companies, are invested in everything from landfills to nuclear plants. I mean, it's so delusional. It is so delusional what she's saying. The Democratic Party, I'm not minimizing it. It's, I think it's better that the Democrats retook the House. I don't think, as her as Speaker, I don't think we're going to get anything progressive. I think we need Barbara Lee, personally. I'm for Barbara Lee as Speaker. She's been progressive for a long time. She was the one person who voted against the unconstitutional, the vote that basically let George Bush authorization of force, that basically let George Bush and Obama and the rest go around Congress to declare war. Congress is supposed to declare war. She's a progressive, and I think she would be a breath of fresh air as the Speaker of the House. AUMF. Thank you, Zachary. I had a brain fart.